to the Year 7 and 8 Medieval Europe podcast. On today's episode, we'll be looking at feudalism in medieval Europe. So Europe's medieval period lasted for about 1,000 years, beginning almost immediately after the collapse of the Roman Empire in Western Europe in 476 CE, or the Common Era. It was a time of great change over the vast area, from Viking homelands in the north to the Mediterranean Sea in the south, and from the Atlantic coast in the west to the borders of Russia and the peoples of the east. Over time, the borders and rulers of European societies changed countless times as people competed for territory and power. Without the Roman army to enforce the laws, society largely broke down. Barbarian raids were common, so people had to find new ways to protect themselves. A system known as feudalism held the answer for many societies across Europe. Feudalism was introduced across Western Europe between the 8th and the 11th centuries and was a kind of social system based on rights and obligations around land ownership. It shaped medieval Europe for hundreds of years. So let's talk about the origins of feudalism. So tribal people began invading Western Europe from about the 4th century. And these groups included the Huns, Vandals, Saxons and Vikings. So the ancient Romans called them barbarians. Some of these tribal people were quite warlike and aggressive. So during the rule of the Roman Empire, common people had been protected against these barbarians by Roman soldiers. When the Roman Empire fell, there were no laws or soldiers left to protect the common people. So as a result, they moved on to lands owned by wealthy and powerful lords, where they could be protected by the lord's private army and take shelter in his castle during attacks. As payment, these people worked the lord's land for him and tended his animals, and so this was the beginning of feudalism. So how did it work? So feudalism was a way of organising society through a hierarchy. A hierarchy is a system that classifies its members from top to bottom in order of importance. So in a feudal society, everyone from the king to the poorest peasant has certain rights. Things that they could expect, such as land to live on or protection from attacks, and responsibilities, so the work they had to perform in return, such as farming or fighting in wars. So under feudalism, relationships in the hierarchy between the lords, so people higher up in the hierarchy, and vassals, people who are lower down in the hierarchy. However, feudalism wasn't simply a top-down structure where people at the top could do and tell people below them what to do. There were obligations. So they were like mutual two-way obligations. For example, a king, otherwise known as a lord, the top of the tree obviously, had an obligation to the nobles directly below him, his vassals. So again, anyone who's below you is your vassal. He provided them with land to live on, known as a fief, and in return, each noble promised to obey the king and provide military support when needed. At the same time, each of these nobles, or lords, had obligations to the knights, and those knights were directly below them, so they're vassals. So these relationships carried on down the hierarchy. So in a feudal system, a person could almost never change their social position. So if a person was born as a peasant at the bottom of the hierarchy, he or she died as a peasant. Peasants could not become nobles no matter how hard they worked or how intelligent they were. That's all we've got time for today. In our next episode, we'll have a look at how societies in medieval Europe were organised. Until then, goodbye.